what is good business kind of plan for a company that is doing open source, because that is quite hard. So we were trying different angles, we were creating different tools, we were trying to give different kind of services to developers. And and that's how I got to work on many different projects. So when you're not kind of focused on one product, and you can either, for example, in Akka, you can create new modules and work on those, then it doesn't get boring. So you also see this kind of new thing that you can work on. So there's no then reason to change.
Hi everyone. Today I'm talking to Martynas Mickevičius, who is a software engineer, open source developer, and a digital nomad. During our conversation, we talked about childhood, social relations, lifestyle, and Martynas' experience of developing Akka, a toolkit for developing highly concurrent, distributed, and resilient message-driven applications for Java and Scala. If you like conversations like this, please like, subscribe, and share. The Happy Developer Podcast is a nonprofit initiative, so your support is highly appreciated. Enjoy. Hey, how are you?
Yeah, I'm doing good. I'm doing good. A bit cold. It's quite cold right now here in Vilnius, but doing good.
Yeah, it's great to see you here, and I welcome you to the Happy Developer Podcast.
Thank you very much.
It's nice to see you here. A very nice background behind you.
Aha. So is there a way for podcast listeners to actually see the video as well?
They
Are they
will
gonna...
see the video.
Whoa, okay, yeah. So my effort then is not wasted. Great.
It's not worthless, yeah.
Yeah.
So actually, when I contacted you, you were in Philippines and you were worried a bit that you will not have a good setup. Now you have a good setup. So speaking of Philippines, so how are you feeling after your recent travel?
Actually feeling really good. So I guess the point of these little trips or large trips is actually to feel better when you come back. So I'm feeling pretty good. Of course, the change in weather is quite astonishing, right? It was quite hot over there. It is quite cold here. But the weather, I guess, is something that you can expect, and you get prepared to that. So that's not a big problem, I guess. So I came back a couple of days ago. So now I see this little realization that life is way faster here, right? Everything is going so fast, so many things to do, so many people to meet and talk to. And I guess this is always kind of my goal to go to these longer trips, to just for some time to have kind of less responsibilities, to focus on my work a bit better. And it really feels when you come back like how much we are busy here. So it's nice. It's nice to have these little contrasts from time to time.
I will definitely would like to dig deeper into the topic of traveling, but maybe let's lean a bit on the work aspect. So you mentioned that it makes your work life easier when you have the possibility to travel abroad to recharge your batteries, so to speak. So you are a developer, right? A software engineer.
Yes,
So and you talked also how life goes fast and you're here right now. So if you just had to summarize maybe how you end up here in this particular moment since your childhood, how would you how would you like describe your story? Like how Martynas became who he is right now? What do you think? Where would we start?
That's a big question. So I guess one of the words that define me currently is a software developer or a programmer, or I guess technologist could be also, I could be described that way. I like technology. I like the things that it allows me to do alone or in a team. So it's a really great stuff, right? And kind of when you see technology and computers as a tool, that kind of it really feels like it gives you superpowers, right? You can imagine something and then later you can do it or not. So if we would need to summarize my how I ended up here, I guess I would try to look way back into past when I started get interested in computers and technology, and of course that was by chance. Like most things happen in life, right? just by chance, our family ended up having a computer. It was for my dad's work. They used to make these little vests or pants, make them, and then bring them over to Russia actually to sell. It was probably in 1995, 96. Um, and uh, and back then, you would actually mechanically program, I guess, the patterns of the vests that you're gonna make. So there would be these kind of round cylinders where you would put in little needles, and then where these needles were, you would get a different color than everywhere else. And this is how we would program your vests. And then, of course, there were lots of competition. So lots of people were making these vests. And then my dad with his brother, they were having this business. And then they heard that, okay, we can actually remove this mechanical thing and put in a computer control thing. And then you can have more complicated patterns. And then these vests would sell better, right? So they got a computer, and then they were starting to make these patterns. And of course, yeah, when there was a computer, me and my brother as well, we started just, I guess, playing with it, playing games on it. And for the longest time, we were just playing a couple of games that were on this computer, and I didn't really kind of think of that you could do with the computer something else. But then after some
Sorry,
time,
Martynas, do you remember what were the games?
Oh, yeah. Actually, I do, and that feeling is really strong because even right now, I'm collecting these old games and trying to make it easy, kind of to run them and play them whenever there's a chance. So I have this little project going on where I'm, kind of building this little old game arcade machine. So yeah, it was some of the games I just kind of remember how they look like, and I wasn't able to find them. So these are just a distant memory, but some others I quite remember. I remember quite well. So, for example, one of them was Aladdin, where you control this Aladdin character and go through the ramps and just kill some baddies, I guess.
Yeah.
And I kind of realized that most of these were just ports from these good old consoles like Nintendo Entertaining System to DOS, to Windows. I guess, to DOS, because we used DOS back then. I have no idea how we got these games. I have no idea where they came from. I guess just maybe sharing floppies around.
Probably.
But yeah, so then kind of I saw that this little thing, a computer, can be made to actually, to do something useful, to do something really interesting and fun. And from there on, I just started involving in these kind of little projects, either just something that was scratching my own itch and I just wanted to, I don't know, make better, or projects with other people. And so on. And then I guess when I went to school, we had some informatics classes. I guess at school, I didn't do that many, I don't know, creative or interesting projects. But then I decided to study informatics in university, and then all of that kind of was my path to becoming a developer. Yeah.
So just to stop here a bit, so I actually oftentimes hear this particular pattern that many software developers get into software development through computer games. And it's interesting where on the one hand, an aspect who provides you a lot of joy and satisfaction moves you into an industry where there's a lot of suffering and annoyance and programs not working. So it's interesting to think about how people end up eventually, right?
It's quite weird, especially because like creating games and game creation industry, I think it's the hardest of all of the technology industries related to software development. So it's really weird, right? You really like games, and then you think, okay, I'll be a game developer, and then you see what it actually is, and then it's tough, especially if you're working at the big companies where you need to kind of where you need to grind quite a bit. I guess it is a bit easier for the ones who are a bit more lucky and end up like indie developers. Then it's really nice to kind of realize your ideas and
Amazing.
Thoughts.
Speaking of your father's business, so do you understand correctly that those tests involve some kind of embedded programming, something like that?
No. So that was
Oh,
a bit too complicated. Of course, so there were some mechanical parts that were being controlled by microcontrollers. But yeah, at the time, no
yeah.
one, not me nor my father, didn't kind of touch that kind of part. So the way we would program these little things, we would draw the pattern in a Corel Draw application, and then we would export it to some file that would be written to a floppy disk, and then there was a
Mm,
different computer that would actually be controlling these machines that were making the vests. And I have no idea what kind of operating system that machine was running, because it was like fully DOS looking, and you would just put in floppy disk and then it would start controlling the machines.
okay,
So
got it.
I wasn't allowed to touch that computer that was controlling the machines, because no one actually knew how it was working. So I guess we would have to get a guy from somewhere to fix it if I broke it. So I was
Mm,
just playing with a computer that had that was at our home, that had Corel Draw installed in it. Um, and actually, yeah, for the longest time, I wasn't even programming on the computer. I was just playing games, messing
sure.
around, messing up the DOS operating system, and trying different file browsers, um, uh, like that. But then I don't know how and why we got a book at our home that was about programming. It was programming with Visual Basic, I think 4 or 3. Um, and then that kind of opened my eyes a bit, that, okay, there's this thing that you can actually write some programs. And then it was really easy to create these little Windows programs that would do something interesting. So yeah, me and my brother actually, we started trying to write some puzzle solvers. So, maybe there's this quite famous puzzle where we have a sheep, a wolf, and I guess something else, and then
Hmm.
and a cabbage, and we need to move them over the river. And then there's this question, like, how do you do it? Because sheep eats a cabbage and wolf eats sheep, and you can't leave them alone, and because they will eat each other. So we wrote a little program that was kind of and simulated. So you could try different strategies, and you would see that,
Mm,
okay, wolf ate sheep and vice versa. Um,
mm.
yeah, so that was, I guess, my first first attempt to do some programming. Yeah, book was nice back then. Now I guess now people don't really learn programming from books, right? Stack Overflow is everything, and
Hmm.
YouTube videos, I guess, as well.
Yeah, I think it's an important problem because Stack Overflow, to my unprofessional eyes, is like a Frankenstein. Whereas when you read like particular books, you get those foundations and you start from first principles. And now in the Silicon Valley mindset, you have just to deliver a working software, at least in the beginning, and then eventually you get those basics. So it seems like in the past it was like top to bottom. Now it's like vice versa. And what do you think about this change in our industry, where maybe less and less young people, maybe just sociologically speaking, probably are less interested in learning those foundations, starting from C, or even even more lower level languages?
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's fine. I think that's fine. I mean, there are many abstractions that we have built, and of course, going down these abstractions, so from some higher level programming language, lower to C to assembly language, might be useful if you're into it and if it's interesting to you, or if you're, for example, trying to tackle some really hard problem and you need to go down these abstractions. But but on the other hand, if you stay at this higher level, you're so much productive. You can
Yeah.
just do things, and um, so it's fine. I don't see a big problem here. Um, of course, there's this other maybe way of thinking where, like, we just compared Stack Overflow with reading books. So I guess there's also this different approach of how you learn programming. Are you just
Mm.
trying to solve a problem, and then whenever you hit a hurdle, you go and search for that kind of for the solution for that problem, and then you move a bit forward, then you of course hit another hurdle, and then you need
Yeah.
to search again, or just reading a book that kind of Yeah, the problem with books is that it doesn't. If you're reading it, I guess you're programming something. You're creating a solution to some problem that was raised by the book author. So it's
Yeah.
not a problem that scratches your itch. So sometimes, especially for me, I feel that I don't have that much motivation reading the book, because
Mm-hmm.
the motivation should be I want to learn a language and not I want to solve a problem, right? And when you have a motivation to solve a problem, then it's harder, but then you just search for some partial solutions and then you just try to mix it up all together.
Yeah, I feel that it's relatable to me because we're planning to get a piano in our household. So our new household, we're planning to move next month. And my partner, she's a musicologist. So she's trained in music. She knows how to play piano, violin. And I always wanted to learn how to play piano. And we were discussing, so what could be a good strategy to do that? So there were like two ideas. Okay, so do we start from basics, like from, let's say, from theory, learning notes, or whatever, or we should start with trying to learn a specific work or piece that I like? And actually, the latter approach felt more satisfying to me because I realized that I want to play a certain type of work. In this case, it would be Philip Glass Metamorphosis 1. He's like a famous minimalist. I'm not sure if you're aware of him. And it's
Yeah, a bit.
he's not like that piece is not that difficult, you know. And I feel that it would be interesting to learn having a specific goal and then work through the problems that I face during that process. So it seems like something like having an idea of a program and trying then to learn it through the process, not the program, but the language, the technology, the all these frameworks and other things.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. I think so. Because we found this analogy between learning how to program and learning to play a new instrument, and we really kind of distinguish these two approaches, there's something in there, right? So I think there's probably something in maybe even something in human mind or the way we learn things that could be analyzed and kind of put into these two boxes. So these are just two different approaches to learning new things. But yeah, for me the same. Now I don't anymore, but I used to play a bit of guitar, and yeah, this is how I would learn it. Just to
Amazing.
find some tabs of some nice song that you want to cover, and then you learn that. You can't improvise when you learn that way, right? You just unless you just kind of join different parts of different songs into one. But it's fun. It's still fun. So even right now, like I can just pick a guitar. Of course, not many songs from back then are still in my head, but just fingers, they just remember what to do. And I don't know any of the notes, what I'm playing, but the feeling and the song is there, right? So it's weird.
Totally. Speaking of music a bit, I actually did a deep dive into your
Whoa.
Facebook wall, and I learned that what you already said, that you have a brother and you also have a sister.
Yes, I
And
have two
if I
sisters actually.
two sisters actually,
Yes.
and if I understand correctly, one of your sisters also is related to music somehow, right?
Yeah, yeah, exactly. My younger sister, she's actually playing a grand piano. So
Amazing.
she always makes me always says to me that piano and grand piano are two different things, like right? And
Yeah.
if especially in Lithuanian, these have two different words. Yeah, she graduated Lithuanian Musical and Arts Academy, and currently she's doing her master's in Tallinn in Estonia. Yeah, and still playing grand piano. Yeah, and through her, I know Philip Glass. You mentioned, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So she is into this contemporary music quite a lot, and there are a couple of really good Lithuanian also bands, I guess, who are playing this contemporary music, which I quite enjoy as well. Yeah, lots of interesting things happening there.
Great. So I guess the reason I'm going here is because I still want to focus on a bit of a family topic. And so you mentioned that you have two brothers, you mentioned that you have two sisters.
One brother. We are four in the
Yeah,
family.
so your two
Yeah,
brothers, also
yeah,
two sisters. And if I'm aware, your brother is also a developer.
yep,
So
yep.
how would you just explain maybe your relationship with your family? What does it mean to you? And how does it help you or not in your life? How would you describe it?
Yeah, so actually, currently we are quite far apart, and yeah, when I say currently, it has been like this for quite some time as well.
Mm,
So me myself I am currently in Vilnius and have been for a while here. So as I mentioned, sister is studying abroad. My older sister is living in London for quite some
mm,
time right now, and my brother is currently in Japan. Um,
wow.
so so yeah, it's really nice and good when we are all together at the same place. So last Christmas was like that when all of us were able to get into one place, and then yeah, and then it's great. It's just that yeah, kind of you miss that feeling when you can just be kind of understood immediately,
Mm,
and you can discuss and talk about things really fast, and get these insights from all of the family members. So this is really what I miss, of course, like but that doesn't happen too much. So yeah, it's a bit unfortunate. These are the people that I like to be with the most, but yeah,
mm.
currently all of them are living their own lives, and yeah, all around the world.
Family of nomads.
Yeah, a bit, and yeah. So yeah, you mentioned my brother is a software the developer. That's correct, but he actually started studying physics. So he came to the he came to the development world a bit differently, and that's awesome. I mean, I just love to have these
Mm,
conversations about physics, about the matter of our universe. These
mm.
are always really kind of yeah, discussions that are, I guess, the greatest. So I really like that we chose a bit different parts, and then we can, I guess, yeah, um, yeah, it's more interesting when people are more diverse, right?
You can learn from each other in a
Yeah.
way. And yeah, so speaking of family, I have this idea as a psychologist that oftentimes our family dynamics can be mirrored in our work dynamics. And I have this theory that the stronger are our relationships with our family members, especially our uh, mother, father, or parental figures in general, including also brothers, sisters. I feel that it helps to create better relationships in a working environment when we talk about teams, working in teams with different people, different mindsets, different ages, different experiences, and how much I know you, and also from your Facebook wall, you also seem a very sociable person. If it feels that you like community, you like spending time with your family, you like spending time with your friends. Uh, the countries you have been visiting recently that I noticed are also Asian countries that are, according to anthropologists, oftentimes called collectivist cultures. For example, Japan, uh, Philippines, or similar countries that care about community, care about the harmony in the team as opposed to individual, let's say, egocentric motives. So I guess the question would be, if you had to analyze, let's say, your family dynamics as opposed to your role, let's say, in a team setting, is there like a correlation or not among these two? Just to philosophize a bit, what do you think about it?
Um, y- yeah, that's yeah. This is something that I've I would need to think about, I guess, to answer a bit more constructively. But I definitely feel the connection. But I
Mm,
guess the connection is there because you learn these social norms and the way to actually how to actually be around people when you're a kid. And of course, I guess part of the learning is in the kindergartens and schools, but still you spend the most of the time in the family. And yeah, when you have brothers and sisters around, then this can really translate to how you see social interaction and social dynamics in other ways of your life. So I definitely feel that that could be something. but also I don't know, because for example, I quite early actually changed the place where I was living. So even before I went to university,
Mm-hmm.
from ninth grade, I moved to Kaunas from Šiauliai, where I'm originally from. My parents still live in Šiauliai. So I was so then I think, yeah, a person is still in its formative years, right? And then I was kind of
Totally.
separated for the most amount of time from my
So sorry,
parents.
did you go
Yeah,
to like a lyceum or a gymnasium over there or
yeah,
something
exactly.
like
I
that?
went to Kaunas Jesuit
Okay.
Gymnasium, and yeah, from ninth grade. So I was kind of, it was interesting, and of course when you're a kid you don't think about these things, and you don't analyze them. But right
Mm-hmm.
now I see that I had to kind of start over with creating friendships in my new class. And of course I still had a couple of friendships from my hometown, so whenever I come back I had a couple of friends that were living around our home. But yeah, it was interesting. I guess it helped that from the ninth grade, there was a new class that was built from people coming from all of the
From
different
scratch in a
schools.
way.
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah.
So
Mm.
everyone was in the same situation, and then
Mm-hmm.
we bonded, I guess, quite all right. We still are friends with quite a few people from those times. So yeah, I guess this. So this family dynamics, yeah, like our family and my brothers and sisters, we don't, yeah, we really kind of cherish the time we are together,
Mm-hmm.
and we haven't been together for a long time right now. So yeah, I guess if there's something that translates to the way I
Mm-hmm.
currently do work and socialize with people, it was from way before.
Sure. What was it like for you to go to a different city, live in a different city in your mid-teenage years? Was it like difficult? Was it challenging? Or did you actually enjoy the freedom and autonomy you had from your parents?
Yeah, so I didn't go like crazy, and I didn't start partying, so that's good. I'm happy that for some reason that idea didn't cross my mind, that my parents now are like 150 kilometers away from me and I can do whatever I want, and I can come back to home whenever I want because no one is actually really looking after me. So I'm happy that I didn't go that path. But yeah, so actually I didn't think about this before, but now this kind of connection was made in my head. It felt a bit like going to these vacation trips that I do right now.
Okay.
So you go to a different place, and then again, you have quite a bit of time for these new activities. Like
Mm-hmm.
you have really kind of it's tabula rasa for your day schedule, right? All of the responsibilities that you had before now are gone, and you can now think of what you want to do and what you want to do with the time. So yeah, I was doing quite well in school, yeah, because I had kind of I had maybe time to prepare or time to think about things. But then I also started doing these, I guess, little side projects that I did. So I started programming a bit more. I started getting involved into various little internet projects. Um, so yeah, I guess that helped me. That helped me. I didn't have to I didn't have that many friends outside of school, so all of my kind of social interaction was in school mostly. And then back home, I was able to just focus on the things that were interesting to me and learning
Mm.
about new stuff that I can do with my computer, I guess.
Mm, amazing. So I guess there are several factors that come into your personality. So on the one hand, having strong relationships with your family, at the same time having an opportunity to build new relationships in your mid-teenage years. And it's very important, I think, because let's say if you spend, in my example, all like 12 classes in the same school with more or less the same people, if let's say uh, you lost the track of the people you're spending time, let's say you don't feel connected, so it might be difficult to get that group. And it's very important in those teenage years to feel connected, to feel that you belong. And in your case, you had this opportunity to build those new relationships, maybe with more smarter kids, because I'm sure that it was not very easy to get into that school. There was some competition. So
There was some, yeah, but I think now it's harder. Back in the days, it
sure.
was a bit easier. Um, Yeah. Also, what I've noticed, so here I was in this new place, and I was just kind of, I had to go every day, right, to school and build these new relationships with my
Yeah.
classmates. There was no, it wasn't by choice, right? And I don't know, maybe because of that, or maybe just because the way I am, even currently, I feel that it is not really hard for me to, for example, start talking with a really old acquaintance of mine. I don't feel like we were grown apart and now we should do some kind of a warm up in our relationship.
Hmm.
I can start immediately be quite a yeah, I can start immediately talking about things that maybe I shouldn't talk when you meet the person after, I don't know, 10 years. And also, I don't think I have really good skills when maintaining relationships. I didn't, probably at some point I had to learn those, and
Hmm.
maybe I didn't learn them sometimes. So I really like, um, I enjoy when someone kind of reaches out to me, but I need to think about reaching out to other people. I need to kind of
I see.
even almost like I need to schedule reminders for myself to reach out to people, because otherwise I just feel that, I mean, there was nothing new. There was no opportunity for us to meet. And when there's going to be an opportunity, we will meet and just talk about all of the
Hmm.
things. But I start to kind of realize that maintaining these relationships should be a bit more scheduled
More
and
conscious in a way. Yeah, I
exactly.
think you hit on an important topic, because, and I think that it can be related to like our whole climate right now, but can be even more related to the software developer experience, because I think that still, despite changes and more women getting into software development, or other identities, more people who are maybe more extroverted as well, seeing that software development is not only for like super nerds or geeks. I think that the diversity is becoming, there's more diversity in the community, but still I see the pattern that most of the engineers, they are quite introspective people, despite the image they may create on the surface that they're very sociable, very friendly, but still there is that need to have some time on your own, to think about things, to reflect on things. Also notice that many software developers uh, are reflective in that sense that they can solve many of their problems on their own. This is why they maybe not don't go to therapy the most often, as opposed to maybe our professionals. So there is that part of introversion, and there is that difficulty to maintain those relationships, because if you have, let's say, a bit of social anxiety, approaching people, even like old friends, can be fearful, because you think, okay, so we didn't talk. So what will be the reason why I'm deciding to write to that person or even call that person, which is not a thing anymore, it seems. So what I do, for example, tell me what you think. I
Yeah.
also felt that problem in a way. So I just consciously answered a question: what are the people in my life that I care the most and I would like to spend most of my time with? And I got around like 2 3 best friends, plus 3 4 friends that I also enjoy, but I wouldn't say that we're very close. And I just created a list in a way, and every time I meet with one of those people, I put a date when I met that person. And when we meet, I understand that it can sound weird.
No, it's
I put that person at the bottom, and the person that I met in the oldest time, then I decide to write. And it's like a process that I automated my, how to say, how we meet people. Of course, there is some organic things. We write each other and share things, but I feel that this process of prioritizing people that I would like to meet helps me with my social well-being in a way.
it makes perfect sense for me. I mean, it's a great system. So yeah, I use this little, of course, I use this little website, which is called Monica HQ. So it's your kind of little personal assistant,
Okay.
and you can then it helps you to also meet people. So for example, you can create schedules that reminds you to reach out to someone. And then, of course, after a meeting, you can also kind of take a little notes so you don't forget things. Because, so I don't know, is it me or is it everyone? But maybe someone else is not talking about it. But
Yeah.
I seem to have a really good memory, but it's really short. So sometimes I feel that, okay, this was the stuff I knew and now I forgot. And then I question the reasons why did that happen. So taking a little notes in that little website that is your little vault of your best friends is quite good. But then I also think about this in a more general ways, like why do we forget things that were, for example, interesting when I learned them, and I would like to use that information, I don't know, in a conversation or maybe in some other situation, and now I don't have it. So why did I forget it? So my working theory currently is that maybe I do a bit too little reflection. So it would be good to, for example, think about the day, what happened throughout the day, maybe even start writing a little diary, not a long one, but just kind of do some bullet points, because of the reflection, it should be the case that we then remember things. If you don't think about something that happened again, then of course you will not remember it after a couple of weeks. So yeah, this is something that I now trying to at least do, this kind of conscious effort of a bit of a reflection, what has happened throughout the day.
Yeah, it totally makes sense because memory is a complicated construct, and many neurological systems are involved in that process. There's like semantic memory that involves maybe concepts, facts. There's like procedural memory that might include maybe specific narratives that people that we experienced. So there are a lot of things that go into. I think that what I would also add, that for a developer, especially who has to hold many things in the working memory when you are solving a problem, it occupies a lot of RAM, And when you are using these resources, so what is left at the end of the day? And what is left is usually more maybe embodied memories. When you get an experience, maybe you remember the feeling, but you don't remember what exactly went on in that specific situation. So speaking of diaries, I think a good way to reflect on things is to make it simple as well, because sometimes people have that thing that, okay, so I'll start writing the diary, and they open a page and like they feel blocked because they don't know what to write. And it becomes difficult, So sometimes I offer my clients like also a system, and it's actually science proven that it works. It creates more life satisfaction. It's like called free good things. So essentially, when a day comes by, maybe in the evening before the bed, what clients are invited to do is just to write 3 things that they appreciate throughout the day. Maybe they solved a good problem. Maybe they learned something about a situation. Maybe they met someone. Maybe they played an interesting game. And then the goal is to explain what was the cause, what was the personal maybe reason why you felt this way. So not like external circumstances, but what actually did you do to feel this way? So on the one hand, you're going through your day. So that's how you're remembering things better. Second, you have to think and what specific factors went into that specific situation, maybe specific positive thing. Let's say if you solve the problem, so what exactly did you do to do that, let's say? And then finally, personal responsibility. You realize that, okay, I'm an active agent in my life. I do things, and this is how I create happiness. And I think it's very important because sometimes there's a tendency just to externalize that. Okay, so I'm happy because I went somewhere, not necessarily that I made the conscious decision to go somewhere. I had the courage and I approached people, and I'm proud about myself. So what do you think about this kind of exercise? Would it like work in your case or not?
Oh, definitely. And for me, it sounds a bit similar, but I think yours is a bit more involved and advanced, which is great. It sounds a bit similar to the gratitude journal, which I guess currently is now being popularized by these guys, right? Kurzgesagt. They are even publishing or selling these little gratitude journals that you can get, and then they encourage you to think about the day, what happened, and think about the things that made you gracious about something. And there are also different tactics. I now don't remember all of them, but they also guide you. They try to kind of at first it starts up with simple things, and then they guide you towards a bit more analyzing about also about the agency that you are in your day-to-day life, which is really important. But if we can go just a tiny bit back, when you talked about different things that are happening in our heads when we are kind of trying to remember things, it's also really interesting to find these things where, like, if I feel that generally I would like to remember more things, but then I noticed some really interesting, I guess, factors of my brain that really surprise me, where they are kind of really good at. So it's really, and then my second question is, how could I exploit that in order to get, for example, better memory? So I listen to quite a bit of podcasts, and then if I need to, for example, there's some really good podcasts with lots of insight, then I want to re-listen it. And then it happens from time to time. I get these flashbacks where I like very vividly remember the place where I was, the surroundings of mine, where I was listening to that podcast at that particular place for the first time. So this connection is really strong in my head, and I would love to kind of, maybe I should, when I'm learning something, I should put myself in different environments, and then when I want to remember them, I should recreate the environment. Maybe that would help me. But that is really interesting to try and learn, like, where your
Yeah.
brain is better at and where your brain is lacking, and then try to work around those things.
Yeah, it's I think what you're basically describing is using the strongest sides of a system, not necessarily trying to reboot everything, rewrite everything, change everything, but maybe focus on the stronger aspects. And sometimes we tend to get too perfectionistic and think that we have to change everything or that we're bad entirely. But we have all we have our strengths. And speaking of memory, maybe some are better at remembering concepts, some are better at remembering experiences, so we can like build on that in a way and feel good about it, as opposed to like, oh, why I'm having a bad memory, what's wrong with me, so
Yeah.
I totally get what you're saying. And I feel that nowadays it's even more difficult. So you are a software engineer, throughout your day you have to memorize a lot of things. When I talk to engineers, they tell me that, let's say, when they are solving a problem, there's like a building that they're building in their heads. This is why they hate when someone interrupts, because it can crumble down during that process. So that you have to take into many factors at one time. So that's also very tiring on the memory, I guess. But then another thing are those podcasts. I also listen to many. I would love to learn what are your favorite ones. I enjoy, for example, Lex Fridman podcast, sometimes Joe Rogan. And what I noticed is that, yes, I receive a lot of content, but not so much of that content like actually stays in my memory. So I usually remember the most relevant things from the podcast, maybe some jokes, maybe some interesting stories, and not necessarily like actual information. And I realized that, damn, we don't respect our brains nowadays. We just put so much content, and then we think, okay, so I'm not remembering things. Maybe you're overworked in terms of your memory. You're just putting too much in it, and then it can burn out. Like, not like psychologically, but just physiologically in a way. So.
Oh, definitely. I'm with you on so many different points on that. So yeah, I tend to kind of treat podcasts as maybe entertainment a bit more than
Yeah.
actually a tool to learn something new. Because I guess because I have the same thing, right? I listen to quite a lot of those, but then not that many information is left in my head. Especially, for example, so one of my kind of latest maybe finds in the podcast world is this Dr. Huberman podcast,
Yeah.
who is a
That,
neuroscientist.
he's getting popular in the tech world. I
Yeah,
noticed that.
exactly. But like he's giving so much detailed information about how you can tweak your day-to-day habits in order to get some benefits. And then after that podcast, after like 1.5 hours of him speaking really fast, because I also listen to podcasts like faster than the
Oh,
original,
wow.
then it's just, then you don't remember anything. So it's almost like I started even to look for, and there are people who are doing like summaries of his podcast, like what are the main points, and that makes sense. So then you can go back to that and see, okay, what can I tweak by his recommendations in my
But
day-to-day
that's
life.
like classical note taking.
Yeah, exactly.
Wow.
Without that, podcasts are useless. And mostly, I try to listen either to something that is kind of work of art. So I really like those podcasts who are not about just putting a lot of information in your head, but it makes you feel some way. So, for example, there's one podcast by Radiotopia called The Heart. There's Caitlin Press, I think she's doing this podcast, and she's kind of analyzing relationships between different kinds of people and how these relationships make people feel. So that is really interesting to me because, yeah, that's something that I don't have that much experience in, I guess. So these are really interesting, and especially since like a person talking in your ear, it can get really intimate. You can get really emotional when it is done the right way. So I really enjoy that kind of podcast as well. But then, yeah, news podcasts are also quite interesting for me. The way people think about stuff that is going on in world in general, but also in technology world, and then you might hear about some new framework or some new tool that you might use in your day-to-day work, and then I just make a little note and then come back to that later. So definitely, it's. I also, for example, I listen to podcasts when I go to gym, when I do some exercises, and then
Oh, wow. That's a
sometimes,
lot of podcasting.
yeah, that's a lot of, and then you kind of realize that you can only do that when, for example, you're doing some exercise routine that you really know, because thinking about how to do good exercise and also thinking about what you're listening, it's hard. That's a bit too much to multitask. So when I know that I'm going to be doing the same stuff that I'm doing for, I don't know, a couple of years, then I can listen to podcasts. But then I also quite regularly just come back to music. So, for example, this morning when I was coming here to you, I wasn't to meet you. I did not want to listen to podcasts because the
Yeah.
additional information right here, when I just want to be kind of think about what I'm gonna talk, I was just listening to music and dancing to
Yeah.
myself. So that was
Amazing.
way better. Yeah.
Amazing. Speaking of those news, and speaking of news in general, maybe technology, what I was also interested to talk to you about is also your professional life. And like for me, maybe it's just for me as a unprofessional person, but what I found the most exciting is that you had an opportunity to work in a company that develops a programming framework. So if I understand correctly, it's Akka framework for Scala language, right?
Yep, that's correct.
So I think I'm not sure where can we start this topic, but maybe you can just share your story. First of all, how did you end up working in that company? First of all, second of all, what did you learn through that process? And maybe we can switch to talking about Java ecosystem in general.
Yeah, so it was in 2013. So let's see.
Okay.
Okay, when people are listening to this podcast, it's 10 years ago, and it was also winter, I guess, when I was working in this small company in Kaunas. So I moved to Kaunas for a couple of months, and then when I kind of thought that when I saw that, okay, I know the team and everything, then I came back to Vilnius to work remotely. That was like the first time I started working remotely as well. And I joined the team to work as a Scala developer. So that was my first job working with Scala. And Scala is this kind of, I guess, more modern and more advanced language on top of JVM, on top of Java Virtual Machine. Before I was a Java developer. And in that startup, I was able to start using quite a bit of new tools and frameworks and libraries that I hadn't touched before. And one of those libraries were Akka. So in that startup, what we were doing, we were doing we allowed our clients to answer questions about travel time. So, for example, you could ask us, I have 30 minutes. Where can I get from this point in London to the where can I get to from this point in London if I choose to drive a car and, for example, or take a bus and walk. And then we would do some number crunching, and then we would spit this amoeba looking shape on top of the map, which would show you, yeah, these are the places that you can get, and this is how to get there. And the system was implemented with Scala, and we used Akka for kind of routing these requests for maps across many nodes. So we were running, I don't know, maybe 20 servers, and then we would need to manage like how to schedule the load across all of these servers. And Akka was doing that. So that was my first kind of touch with
and that's
with
still
these.
in Lithuania, right?
Yeah, that's still in Lithuania. So Akka itself is a framework that allows you to makes it a bit easier to write concurrent systems. So it's actually quite hard for developers to write regular programs. I think there are a couple of papers that tell us that developers on average do about 10 bugs in 1,000 lines of code. That's quite a bit. Some of them are found, but then some of them go to production. But then when we talk about concurrent systems, so systems where many things can happen at the same time, it's way harder. And of course, all of the languages, Java and Scala itself, it gives you some tools that make it a bit easier or way more easier to write these concurrent systems. And Akka is that. It allows you to think about, it gives you a couple of abstractions. Yeah, we talked about abstractions today before. It gives you this abstraction, an actor. And the actor is little island of no concurrency. So inside of an actor, everything happens sequentially, one step after another. So inside of actor, you really are in your safe place. So the feeling that you mentioned before, where developers have like, oh, everything is in my head, and I really cannot be distracted because otherwise I cannot like do decisions. That feeling is not in your head when you're writing Akka programs, because you have everything local, and everything that you see is everything you have. You don't need to think about something else. But then you can make actors talk to each other by sending each other messages. And this is the concurrency part. I mean, all of the actors, they work at the same time and they send each other messages, but the logic inside of actors happens sequentially. So that was new for me. I mean, I knew that it is possible, for example, to manually create threads in whatever programming language that you choose, and then whatever that thread is doing, it's going to happen concurrently. But then you need to think about like synchronizing between threads and all of that stuff. I didn't think that someone was creating these abstractions for concurrent programming, and Akka was one of these things. So yeah, I started using it. I started upgrading the system that we were writing for these searches in maps. And then I guess one dark and cold winter night, I noticed in Akka blog post that they are looking for additional members to join their team. And I was just kind of fresh out of university. I didn't really know much about concurrency, and I don't know what kind of what went in my head, but I said, yeah, I'll try to apply. Let's see what happens. What could be the worst, right? And then I applied. I wrote that, hey, I'm this guy, I'm using Akka, I really like it. I think by the time maybe I did one or two little changes to Akka itself, but there were maybe some documentation updates or something else.
Oh, like an open source and all.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, exactly. So Akka was being developed in open source as well. So you were able to actually look at the code, you're able to learn it. And if you would like to change something about the way it works, you could do that quite easily.
And can we stop here a bit? Because I feel it's interesting because, so first of all, you did that yourself. So you decided to apply it. So was it like through their website, or
Yeah, it
Something
was,
like that.
they gave an email, and then, like applicants send your, I guess, your motivation sentence or paragraph, like why are you a good candidate for the
Yeah.
team? And yeah, also they, I guess, asked for CV as well.
So essentially, you pitched yourself to them. Was it like fearful to you to do that, or was it easy at that moment in your career?
Yeah, so yeah, it was something that I haven't done. So it was new. Also, I remember that like when I noticed that blog post, that announcement, I didn't jump on it immediately. I thought, okay, so this is interesting. Let's see like how it goes. And then like every day you think about it a bit more. Should I try or should I not? If I try to apply, what will I say in that
Mhm.
letter? And then I think it was around Christmas. I think I was back in my hometown, this kind of this downtime after Christmas dinner, no one's doing anything, watching
And
TV or
then
something.
Martinez is thinking, maybe I should apply.
Yeah, exactly. And then I thought, yeah, I have this kind of free time. I'm calm and collected. Let's just write this letter and apply.
Mm.
If I remember this correctly, I think this is how it happened. And yeah, so it wasn't fearful. It was quite a bit of unknown, of course, what
Mm.
will happen. And of course, yeah, I was just expecting the best because, of course, I didn't have the experience, so I was just interested in what's gonna come out
And
of it.
did you realize that they will provide remote opportunities, or were you open to the possibility of moving to a different country? I'm not sure where they are based. I think it's in the States, something like that. Or...
Yeah, so the company itself is incorporated in United States. The company back then was called TypeSafe.
Mm.
Then and yeah, and so when of course we had a couple after my letter, we had a couple of
Yeah.
interactions with the team members, and I think I got to talk about a bit what I was doing during my master studies. I was playing around in coding theory, and maybe what helped for me was that one of the
Mm.
members in the team also knew a bit about coding theory, so we kind of exchanged a couple of sentences and kind of had this little nod that we know what we were talking about, both of us. And then I was given an opportunity to join the team as an intern. So the outcome of that announcement was that they got two members into the team. So one was real member, Conrad. He is now currently working at Apple, actually, and he is bringing concurrency primitives, actors, into Swift programming language. So I mean,
Wow.
he's way above my head, right? um, and they also gave me an opportunity to join as an intern. And back at the time, all of the team that was working on Akka, they were based physically in Sweden, in Uppsala.
Mm.
Um, but all of the members were from different countries. So there were a couple of one German, one Hungarian. Konrad was from Poland, and I was from Lithuania. But I was joining the team just when they were finishing a major rewrite of the way Akka worked. And like for that rewrite, I think it maybe took them a year. They co-located, so they moved their families and everyone into the same city in Sweden, in Uppsala, and
Okay.
worked from an office which used to be a prison. So all of the rooms in that office were all the prison cells. And yeah, and then when I joined, I also moved to Sweden for maybe 2 or 3 months, and then after that we decided that okay, that project is over, now we can move to our back to our countries. And then I moved back to Lithuania and continued working remotely in
And
TypeSafe.
by the way, so before you joined that company, have you already completed your master's in Uppsala, or was like
No,
it later?
So yeah, that's the funny thing.
Mm.
So that was not my first time in Uppsala. During my bachelor studies in Vilnius University, I went for a year via Erasmus program
Oh,
to
I see.
Uppsala as well. Yeah. So it was really weird for me to come back to the same small student town in Sweden. I didn't really think that I will come back. Um, and I think like even when I was in Uppsala the first time in 2010, the beginnings of Akka were already there. So like the people which I ended up working 3 years later were already in the same city working on the tool that I will be like after 3 years joining them to work together. So that was, yeah, a bit.
But at the
Just
time, you didn't know anything about Akka.
no, no,
No.
no,
So it's
not
just
even
a
about
happy
Scala. Yeah.
coincidence that you were spending time and studying in a city that essentially you will be spending time in your future career working on a framework in a way.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So I guess I misunderstood your city. So you in Uppsala, you were for Erasmus. It was not like a master's degree.
No,
Okay,
exactly.
got it.
Yeah,
Got it.
I went there for a year. Yeah, I did my bachelor's and master's in Vilnius University.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay. So speaking about that experience working on a framework, so how would you explain like the key difference when it comes to creating software, let's say, you know, a particular web app, as opposed to creating a tool that will help you creating systems? So what are like the key differences? Maybe someone would be interested as well sometime in the future to work to create a language or a library or a framework. So what would be those key differences? What do
Yeah.
you think?
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, there are quite a few, right? So maybe like the first thing that really pops into the first thing that you notice is that of course we don't have any clients or users, right? I mean,
Well,
users
you have users that
of
are using
course.
that tool in a way.
Yes, but they reach you, all of them are developers, right? So there
Yeah.
are no users who are just trying to get some service or trying to buy something, and they just kind of happen to stumble onto your website and then try to complete something, and if it doesn't work, then you need to fix it. So there's that part is completely different, and all of the users of a framework are developers.
Yeah.
And so, and also you are, Akka is an open source project. So you also have a community right besides the core team that is working on the project. So maybe the first thing that I noticed when I joined was that all of the work and all the communication happens in the open. So when you're working at the company, you have, I don't know, maybe internal Slack for communication. Then you have internal, so currently probably people don't use email that much, but you have internal code repositories where you are pushing code. None of that is happening in the public. And in Akka, at one point, we even didn't have an internal Slack. When I was working, there was no Slack around the time, so we were using this tool called FlowDoc. But then FlowDoc was kind of discontinued, and then we were thinking, okay, let's do it in the open. And there's this chat for open source projects called Gitter. We were using Gitter to chat. There was one kind of channel for all of the people who are coming and maybe have some issues, questions, where they can talk with us to answer. And there was another channel for internal team where we would just talk in the open. So that was way different, right?
Quite transparent in a way, because
Yeah.
I guess would it make you like a bit self-conscious when it comes to writing something in that channel?
Yeah, exactly. Yes, and I remember there was a couple of times where you kind of need to think about twice, but it's mostly about the things where, so for example, the way Lightbend or TypeSafe at the time was making money, they were selling consulting services to other companies who would like to, for example, start using Akka, or they would have really big systems and they would need some help with getting better kind of concurrency or better throughput in their systems. And then you know that some feature maybe requests or there were some discussions with the clients, then you can't really talk about these things in the public because you just don't know how these clients would feel about it. So in some particular situations, yeah, you would have to be a bit conscious about it. But usually, I mean, it's just kind of tech talk about some implementation details. That is
Like on
just,
Stack Overflow in a way, just
yeah,
talking about technical things.
exactly.
Okay, so one of the differences is that you have a different customer in a way, user, which is a developer. Now, leaning a bit on this part, so I'm sure that you worked in companies that you have like an internal user, maybe a product manager, or maybe a specific department that you're providing software. You might have an external user, maybe outside a company, a particular company or something like that. Then you might have, let's say, just a casual user who's using the app. And now you have someone who's like a creator who will be using what you are creating in a way. So what it's like to have a developer as a user or customer? What was your
Yeah.
experience?
So all of the feedback that you're getting is way more constructive, right? So of course there are some times where people are just maybe not really happy about the way the
Yeah,
framework is working, and then they tend to be a bit a bit
opinionated
more
sometimes, maybe.
opinionated, exactly. But then on the other hand, for example, when you're getting a bug report, most of the time it's just amazing, right? So person got into a trouble, then it tried different things, he or she logged everything that they tried to do, and then they gave you this kind of, yeah, what happened to me, what I tried, what I expected that would happen, and please help me, like what is happening. So most of the time it's quite good, and you don't need to kind of switch the language that you use with your
Yeah,
teammates and then talking with
exactly.
the customers. So yeah, it's quite
Hmm.
it's quite nice. The So yeah, when I started working on Akka, and still like this developer experience is still quite near and dear to my heart. And yeah, I think this is when I got in love with it, and this is like the sphere in the whole program that I find myself motivated to work at the most.
And you
Um,
spent quite a lot of time at that company, right? Like 3
yeah,
years, something like that?
it was 5 years.
5 years, wow.
Yeah,
That's a lot right now.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Now, if you manage to pull off a year for a young developer, that's already
Yeah, I think
quite a record.
it helped that Lightbend was searching and is still searching, like what would be good, what is good business kind of plan for a company that is doing open source, because that is quite hard. So we were trying different angles, we were creating different tools, we were trying to give different kind of services to developers. And yeah, and that's how I got to work on many different projects. So when you're not kind of focused on one product, and you can either, for example, in Akka, you can create new modules and work on those, then yeah, it doesn't get boring. So you
Hmm.
also see this kind of new thing that you can work on. So yeah, there's no then reason to change.
So another, I guess, possible difference could be is that there's quite a lot of variety and there's like no ceiling where to stop at that framework because you can improve like in all the time, I guess. Now at the on the other hand, sometimes improving is not what your user expects. People sometimes like the framework as it is. Why do you have to change it, and getting used to a different feature, I guess it can be also unsatisfying to some people. So that's like a double-edged sword, I guess. What do
Yeah,
you think?
but also when thinking about improving and, for example, adding new features, we didn't do that much of this.
Okay.
Mostly because the Akka itself, the Akka framework itself, is quite modular. So there are like different parts that are responsible for quite, I guess, their responsibilities are quite small and also quite well defined. So when we
Mm.
kind of tackle that issue and we solve it, then it would be kind of it would be really a lot of effort to make it better, and the better would be to rethink it to like with different constraints and
Actually, like
maybe.
two different principles in a way,
Yeah,
using different
exactly. So
principles.
most of the work was actually
Mm.
building more of these modules.
Got it.
And then we would see that, okay, we would like to, for example, instead of having actors, we see that now people are like leaning towards stream processing. So where in actors you have some computation as the core thing, in stream you have data going through a lot of kind of pipeline stages in order to get processed. And then we worked on Akka streams, for example, a little
Mm.
module that help you to move data around and do processing of the data. And of course, these Akka streams internally, they were implemented using actors, like the stuff that we know, and we know that it works and it's bulletproof, and that concept is good. But on top of that, we built something else. Um, And yeah, that is still going. Akka itself is changing in different ways, and yeah, I'm really happy to see that Lightbend is still they still keep innovating and yeah, like working on just kind of just before the tide, right? They are kind of pushing the new things that yeah, that the whole ecosystem is going to be grateful to have in the future. Yeah.
Speaking of Scala in general, from a recruiter perspective, I remember when I was working with a company here in Lithuania. I'm not sure if I can name them, but I will do. So it was Wix, and they are Wix at the time, I think, was the only like major player in Lithuania that was using Scala, Akka included. And I feel and I think that when you're working in a company like this that is creating a technology, you become a target, like in a positive sense, in various recruiters' eyes who, let's say, would like to have someone who is working in the weeds around the technology and would maybe help internally to adopt the technology. So did you, like, during those 5 years receive many invitations to join companies that use Scala, Akka, or whatever, and what was it like for you?
Yeah, there's this kind of background radiation of LinkedIn messages that
Why do you say radiation? Radiation doesn't sound positive.
yeah, in a sense that there's something going on in these LinkedIn messages all the time, and you tend to, yeah, some of the things are, some of the contacts that you get are because you're doing Scala, but then yeah, but like I mean, these also get lost between all of the other suggestions to work with Java, even PHP and C Sharp.
Yeah,
So
that's a
it's just
different problem. Yeah.
yeah, exactly. Maybe so at the start it was a bit different because like my LinkedIn really kind of jumped in a seriousness in a short amount of time. So before I worked at this smaller Kaunas startup in Lithuania, and now I'm kind of developer in Lightbend. So maybe there was a bit of a jump of messages back then, but then I mean, yeah, it still continues. But yeah, yeah, it's I
So what was
guess
it like
yeah.
to become like the popular developer? I feel that there is a switch in your psychology when you see that. What was it for you?
So maybe what started happening was that I started getting invitations to do talks into first local meetups, of course. So in Vilnius, we have this Java users group as well. And yeah, I gave some talks over there. But then it happens that, for example, some clients of the company of Lightbend, back time it was in Belarus as well, we're asking, for example, to get a visit by engineer and maybe help them out with some of the problems that they were having. And then next to that, also there was an invitation to speak in a local Java user group, or for example, they so of course, before all of the happenings in Russia and Belarus, they would have this really nice functional programming conference as well. It was called FBY, Functional Belarus. I spoke there as well about Akka actors. So yeah, you could start getting these invitations. And that was a bit tough, right? Because now you have an expectation of talking with people and kind
Now
of
you're the expert.
the expert, and also becoming this evangelist, right? Like you need to preach, you need to talk about stuff. And I mean, I was happy to do it because the stuff that we were working on, it was really exciting. But at first I was like lacking the knowledge of all of the stuff that we were working, so I knew some parts of it, but then it was a bit afraid for me to, for example, get a question from the audience that I wouldn't know the answer. But then, of course, you learn to say that, oh, that is a good question, but currently I don't know the answer. I will get back to you.
And you never do.
Or yeah, that's also one of the ways out. So yeah, and of course, public speaking is still something that it's a bit, yeah, it's
Do you enjoy it?
When it's over. Then it's a really great feeling, right? To stop and say thanks for listening to me. If you have any questions, please go
But
ahead and ask
about
me.
the process, understand totally that before before entering the stage, it can be dreadful because you are in that preparation mode. You try to put your slides together, make sure that your ideas are clean, and you will know what you would like to address. But that process, when you're on the stage, talking to people, you see people listening to you, maybe frowning a bit, trying to get what you're saying, maybe seeing surprised, then you get those questions. I'm sure you're answering them, and that dopamine hits your head. So what about that process? How would you describe it?
Yeah, okay, yeah. So being on the stage and talking, yeah, it is something, right?
Mm.
I don't know if people who really have lots of experience at that, I don't know if they stop getting this dopamine rush or adrenaline rush. I don't know what that is. I think maybe adrenaline is dopamine. Yeah, I don't know. But yeah, then I feel that I don't have time to enjoy it. Then, like you're
Ah,
focused, I am trying to deliver what I've prepared in the best way, and yeah, it goes like it goes in a couple of seconds. It's a bit of rush. Maybe with a bit more experience, I could enjoy it more. But of course, in these conferences, yes, you are trying to communicate some interesting information to people so they understand or get something out of it. But also, you need to do it with a bit of a show, right? You need to be entertaining, and that's hard.
yeah, I
So
can
you need to
imagine.
be, yeah, like the best, I guess, speakers are something between stand-up comedians and also really
Mm,
good experts in their field, and then it
mm,
really makes it to the listeners' hearts and heads, I guess. But yeah, it's hard, and but this is why people, of course, go to the conferences. They there to be entertained, of course, not by jokes, but also mentally about ideas, about how
yeah.
clearly they are presented. And this is also how I got into Scala, right? Like a couple of jobs before that company in Kaunas, I was working at SEB Bank as a Java developer, and all of us were all of the team of Java developers were given opportunity to go to a conference, to a programming conference in Poland. And over
Mm,
there, for the first time, I've listened to a talk that was about another framework, Play
mm,
framework, that was written in Scala. And then I learned about
mm.
Scala and everything. So it really kind of opened my mind that, wow, there are these really interesting and different things in the ecosystem that is so close to where I work. And I would like to explore it a bit more.
Totally. Yes, speaking about that, public speaking in a way,
Hmm.
I guess what comes to my mind is what you're saying is that, yes, I understand that there is that adrenaline. And of course, adrenaline and dopamine are different hormones, different neurotransmitters. So basically, adrenaline or neuroepinephrine, it
Mm.
essentially mobilizes your attention. So you are in that like fight or flight mode. So it makes your muscles tense. It helps you, let's say, me be more prepared, and alert in that particular situation. And this is why I guess many developers who have a bit of a fear of public speaking, they usually don't remember the whole process. It's like what goes through like minutes, or seconds. So when I speak about dopamine, I guess that's, yeah, maybe this is more for experienced public speakers, but I guess it also depends on how much you are aware during the process. So I feel that what I enjoy during a public speaking process, when even if it's, especially when it's done face to face, is just trying to appreciate the moment that people came to listen to you. And regardless of what you will say, how you will say, whether you will be entertaining or not, something will stick in their brains. Something will be left. And I think that this is very important to appreciate. And when you appreciate it, it doesn't become that dreadful because they are on your side in a way. They come to listen to you, and they want you to succeed because they want to be entertained, and they are open to that. And even if, let's say, it is a critical thinker, I worked in a university, so I would have critical students challenging me, and I would also be open to that because for me, that public sparring thing, I enjoy that as well, because then you have an opportunity to provide others a possibility to listen to a interesting discussion or banter. And I think it can be also entertaining, and nothing to be feared, because sometimes people can point very interesting ideas, and then when you are able to appreciate that feedback and show gratitude to that, as opposed to being defensive, I think that's also a good opportunity to show your character and show your personality. So I sometimes think that developers were fearful of those experiences. They feel that they have to be, like, as you said, super funny and also very deep and very technical and answer all the questions. And for me, it doesn't sound very realistic, because I'm sure that even those experienced public speakers, they enjoy it and people engage and they are uh, thinking critically, asking good questions, and then you get that discussion. So to me, it's I'm not doing all that too much nowadays after COVID, but I would enjoy those experiences. So I guess this is what I was asking, whether you would have those moments as well in your situation.
Yeah, yeah. Really good place to train this or to try it out and see what happens are these local user meetups. So there you have a really small number of people, and even before that, asking questions after conferences or after these group meetings is also a really good tool, right? Because then you also need to push through something, push through this barrier of the whole audience just being silent.
Yeah.
And you kind of, okay, so I have a question, I would like to ask this and this. But yeah, but now, so we just recently had another, after a first JUG meeting after COVID. And yeah, I kind of noticed how relaxed I am during this meeting. After I didn't talk, but I asked some questions. I just hang around, and of course, like these things, they come with I guess experience.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
Amazing. Okay, so Martynas, we talked a bit about Scala, about Akka, about your journey into joining Lightbend before TypeSafe, right?
Yeah.
So just any ideas briefly about Java in general. Let's say Stack Overflow every year produces a report on what people think is the most promising language. And when we speak about Java, Scala included, maybe Kotlin, what is your idea about the future of Java? Is there a place in the future, or is it gaining popularity? Is it losing popularity? What is like your feeling of the market right now? What do you think?
So when I joined Lightbend, TypeSafe at the time, Java ecosystem was in a really interesting place because there were lots of these different languages popping up into existence that would compile to Java bytecode. So in the end, you would have this fresh language with new ideas, but then you could use all of the already existing Java ecosystem to write programs. So that was kind of the new thing at the time. And out of all of these, quite a few new programming languages, I guess 2 of those are still currently in use. So one of them is, you mentioned, Kotlin, and another one is Scala. Definitely. I think, yeah, the future is bright. The future, at least, it's really interesting. Because after that, so why did these new programming languages that were built on top of Java emerge? Was that Java was stagnating a bit. So it was really it was still kind of being released new versions, but they were not adding quite a few of new features. But that changed quite a bit. So now there's a new Java version every, I think, 6 months. And I think every third of these versions is a like long-term release where you can use it and you know that nothing's going to change that much. And every version, it really includes quite a bit of new modern things into the language when I talk about Java. So of course, as a Scala developer, where Scala is quite modern already, so you see like these little things that were kind of proven by Scala that these are useful.
And
These
then
makes
taken from Scala to Java. Right?
Yeah, exactly. But this is how it is, right?
Sure.
So I see Scala as a vessel for really kind of pushing the way we write programs to the limit. And the way we write programs, I mean, there are of course more exciting, or I don't know, maybe even academic or languages that really push the envelope. But Scala is all about of having this You can use Scala in enterprise, right? Like there are banks and big companies that use still Scala, and then they get to use these new features as well. So in Scala, there is always this balance between writing these programs that do everyday stuff, and every developer can learn them and use them to write better programs. And yeah, lots of interesting developments still going on in Java as well. So just today I read that they are preparing for JDK 20 release. So Java version 20 is going to be around the corner.
Wow.
And yeah, quite a bit of tools for writing better concurrent programs. So concurrency now is the
Is
game.
the thing, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Like from developers' machines to servers, we usually have more than one core. So we usually have a way of running lots of computation at the same time. And then developers need better tools to actually be able to harness that, to use
Mhm.
all of that concurrency and not leave it on the table. Um, and also Scala itself, it's pushing an envelope again quite a bit. So Scala 3 was released a couple of years ago. Um, so yeah, it has some really bold choices. So now, for example, in Scala 3, the braces are optional. So it looks a bit more like Python because you
Mm.
kind of ident, and this is how you say that this is a new block, and that makes the language feel really clean and lightweight. And of course, it has all of these advanced techniques that you can kind of tell Scala compiler what are your intentions as a developer, and then you have this compiler on the side as a helper to you, saying, okay, don't do this, this is not smart, this is not gonna work, don't even try to push this into production because it doesn't compile, not stop doing this. So yeah, like Scala is pushing, I guess, giving more and more tools for the developers to tell the compiler what you're up to, what do you want to do, so then compiler can help you and guide you to actually arrive at the correct implementation.
What I'm hearing from you essentially is that, and I think it's very important for a ecosystem of a particular language, is uh, getting those additional languages that improve, let's say, the syntax or various features of the language or various frameworks, because then it encourages those initial creators of, let's say, Java to innovate as well. And then I see the same trend in psychotherapy, where, for example, I'm not sure how much you are aware of different schools of psychotherapy, but just briefly, like Freud's psychoanalysis, like was the thing, let's say over 100 years ago, and it was very focused on the past, on childhood traumas, on early childhood experiences, on relationship with your father, mother, and how this affects your, let's say, current well-being. And the idea was that you have to be aware of those conflicts, initial conflicts, to solve those conflicts, to gain insight. So that was like the initial beginning. And oftentimes in the psychotherapy world, people thought that psychoanalysis or psychodynamic therapy was very orthodox, very like, it was like the lower level thing that like C could be a good comparison, you know. And then different schools came into like cognitive behavioral therapy, where they focused on behavior, on the patterns, on how you think and how your thought processes affect your emotions and your choices. We got humanistic therapy that focuses on how you see yourself in life. There is existential questions, so it became more about what's your vision, what's your idea, what's your goals, what is good about you as opposed to what is wrong about you. Positive psychology, similar thing. And then what happened is that those new schools of therapy influenced those psychoanalytic thinkers, and then we got into a school like intersubjective psychoanalysis, whereas little focus on the past and more focuses on the relationship, how various conflicts, let's say, emerge and how we talk together, and analyzing that relationship, being more open, so a therapist could be more open about one's feelings, one's experience. So those humanistic CBT or cognitive behavioral therapy forms influenced psychoanalysis, and then psychoanalytic thinking became one modern and popular and you know innovated. So I always I'm always fascinated by how certain patterns repeat in totally, maybe sometimes unrelated fields. But yeah, I guess that's the beauty of it.
Definitely. Yeah, it makes so much sense. And also, I think one really important precondition for one field to influence the other, it needs to, so the field that does some innovation, it can't, I think it can't be left as just a theoretical thing, right? You need to apply it and see that actually it makes sense to solve some new problems, and it makes sense for people
Sometimes
to
people
use it.
could be solved as well. Yeah,
Yeah,
totally.
exactly. So I guess this is what happened with these additional languages. They became a vessel that was a practical way of showing that these new ideas make sense. Developers are liking the way it makes them write new programs. Because even before that, even before all of these other languages, there were of course papers that were talking about these new ideas of how we can improve languages. But I guess these papers influenced Scala and other languages. But if they stay at a theoretical level, I guess the impact is quite small. So then you need to have this vessel of riffing on different ideas in practice, and of course that vessel couldn't be Java, because it's just it was a bit too slow.
Got it.
So this tandem is really, it really makes sense.
Okay, so I think that is a good place to move into also a bit of a different topic. And you once again gave me some inspiration about it, because we talked about Freud, and Freud talked about certain situations when our unconscious mind uh, gives something to us, gives some wisdom, gives some ideas, maybe some idea of certain conflicts, some unconscious ideas. And he came up with the idea of a Freudian slip, where, for example, when we say something without having a conscious idea, and what we say says something about our unconscious mind. So when you said to solve people, I'm not sure that there was some unconscious Freudian slip, but I guess where I'm getting at is that the problem of solving people and solving maybe software developers in particular, because I realized throughout the years when I'm working in the field that software development is not only about the technology that we use. It's not about the process that we use. It's also about the people who are using the technology or using the process. And sometimes when we talk about the technology, its benefits, drawbacks, we should also talk about the people who will be using the technology, which is, like, in my opinion, one of the most important factors, maybe even the key factor. And my hypothesis is that I'm trying to, let's say, raise in this podcast is, okay, so what are the additional experiences in a developer's world that can improve the person's well-being, the developer's well-being, and then improve the quality of the software? So, like, this relationship between the people who are creating the software and the actual output is very interesting to me. So I'm a fan of Conway's Law. I'm not sure if you heard of it. Yeah, so basically how certain communication patterns can be mirrored in the software architecture. So I have the same idea that the way we feel about ourselves, our dynamics sometimes can be mirrored in the features that we create. So, for example, just an example, let's say if a group of people feel lonely, they might project their loneliness to the user and think that the user is lonely. Therefore, we would have to create a social network, a like button, or something like that. And my hypothesis is that if those group of people would be aware of their loneliness, possibly there would be no need for such a feature. So I guess where I'm heading at is that there are certain experiences that if let's say developers would be more aware or maybe experience more things, I think that we would have more happy developers and therefore better software and therefore better world in a way. So just to give you some context where I'm coming from, what is my framework and what I'm thinking about. So I would also like to talk to you about certain maybe non-technology related things that also contributed to the way you, Martynas, are. And so before we get into this, just would like to hear your thoughts around this hypothesis. In a way, what do you think about? Is there like a relationship between our psychology and the software we create? What is your thinking around
Yeah,
that?
yeah, definitely. But of course, it's a complicated matter, right? And when you say, for example, can it help some methods or some activities that can help you to create better software? But then the question is, what is better software, right? Like, are
Yeah.
are you trying to be more in line with your users that are currently using your software and then make it work better for you? But then,
So
like,
Martinez,
yeah,
yeah, you very good point. I guess when I say better software, I mean more ethical software that creates value as opposed to creating problems in a way. So I guess I'm not talking about like tools or companies that create tools. I guess I'm talking about uh, products that have a direct relationship between our use and our well-being. So it could be social networks, social media, maybe games as well. So I guess
yeah,
this is where I'm hitting. Yeah.
yeah. Yeah, this is okay. So this is quite a big question. I mean, so at first, I don't think that many people, when, for example, they're switching between jobs, you tend to maybe first think about the technologies that this company is using. So like the programming language that you are going to use, and of course, for example, going back to the recruiters, they are hunting you down because of the skills that you previously had. They're not saying that, okay, you like fishing really much, and we are creating this fishing app, so maybe you would like to join us.
Mm.
Whatever the technology you use, that would be very interesting for me to join fishing company because I like fishing. So similar thing with companies that are working on ethical things or unethical things, right? First, you as a person would have to be a bit more ethically involved into
Mm.
the issues surrounding your world, and then I guess you can start to, I don't know, evaluate whether one company is doing a more ethical thing or less ethical thing. Um, but yeah, of course, yeah, when it comes with social networks and the way they kind of push us towards one way of interaction again or the other way of interaction, so that is also quite hard for me to decide. Like with all of the things that are currently happening in Twitter, and people are
Mm.
leaving Twitter as well. So I start to think like, what could be, because I use mostly Twitter for kind of ingesting news and talking a bit with people that are like outside of Lithuania. So the friends and people from the community all around the world. Um, I start to think like, yeah, like what would be better tools to use to get more, I guess, sanity into our worlds.
Mm.
And what I guess is really, but yeah, so this is going to be a very concrete example, which at least for me shows that it doesn't work and it doesn't make sense. So this, for example, algorithmically pushing some content to you
That
because
you're already using, let's say, or
yeah,
enjoy.
exactly.
Yeah.
And that is just, we already talked that we have information overload. I mean, we can choose to listen to the podcasts that we like, so we don't really need to. And for example, when I add someone to my Facebook friends, or when I start following someone on Twitter, I want to hear this person in particular because usually I know this person and I'm just interested in what they want to tell to me, and then I really kind of don't want some algorithm making decisions by the people that I followed and then try to push me some new information.
Yeah.
If there's something that I need to learn or know, some people that I follow will talk about it. So I guess this is, for example, why I don't really I'm a bit on the side of all of the debacle going on in Twitter, because if you're using the original Twitter app, you will get these suggested tweets pushed to you,
Mm.
similar like you have in Facebook. But if you use some alternative Twitter app that doesn't do this, then you only get the feed of the people you follow. So I would really love that, for example, in Facebook, it would also be possible to do it like this, just to have some
Mm.
clean view of the information that is coming from the people you know and you followed. Um, and of course, there are some alternatives. There are some alternatives in the social networking tools that are trying to kind of to replicate as much as possible the social dynamics of people in the friends group, for example. So how you follow people, how you exchange information, and how you broadcast the stuff that you are putting into that social network to your friends. So that, for example, could answer one of the questions if I would have to work at some social networking company, and then I would like to choose this company that is thinking of how to make better social network that improves the life of everyone, and not just the few that really kind of I guess yeah. So
Okay,
yeah.
interesting. Yeah, I guess you made a very good point that uh, some of this problem starts at the hiring stage where, for example, you're picking certain people to join your company, and in a market where there's a lot of technology and there's a lot of specialization, you tend to uh, attract those people who have a specific skill set. And I guess this is a thing that ties well to what we described before. So if you have people who are good at thinking from first principles, so it doesn't matter what is the technology. So you are, if that is the case, then you would have much more variety to choose from. And then another thing is that our, let's say, LinkedIn or other related platforms are built around mainly experience and skills. It's focused on emphasizing these as opposed to, let's say, causes that you care about that are put like at the bottom of the LinkedIn page, you know. And if, let's say, your ethical framework would be as important as, let's say, your skill set and competence and experience, and it would be like which is in many companies it is a factor, but I think that it's not that big of a deal. So if it would be, let's say, then you would get more people that are like-minded, that are maybe thinking about technology, solving the problem from a technology perspective, but also thinking about the business problem or climate, like in the general sense, psychological climate as well. So yeah, so fishing, yeah. I would love to see a place on LinkedIn to put my hobbies. That would be, let's say, also a good assessment criteria for someone. But yeah.
Yeah, so maybe there's, for example, open source gives us a good place to actually see what people are interested
Yeah.
in. So if you're headhunting some developer, you can take a look at the repositories that are in the open and see what kind of things this developer is solving.
Working on his free time. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And then if
Mm.
your company is doing something similar to these hobbies, then yeah, I think there's a good chance to headhunt.
So let's speak about hobbies as well, because you have some, and I'm not sure if we will have a lot of time to dig around them a lot. But I noticed also from your Facebook wall and from how much I know about you. So we talked about open source. That's one of your passions, right? But there's also other passions. So I noticed that you're into cars, into motorcycles as well. So I would love to learn more about this particular passion. I also noticed that you travel a lot. So we talked already that you're spending quite some time already in various Asian countries, maybe more on the eastern part. So I noticed that you've been in Philippines, Japan, Vietnam, all those countries. And I also noticed, and just to put you like a dump of
Wow.
ideas, I
Yeah.
also noticed that you spent some time in various cancer awareness initiatives. So that also raised my curiosity. So, like, speaking of your passions in general, like cars, travel, or maybe non-governmental initiatives. So I also feel that these things contribute to that happiness part. So I think that the more a person is diverse in one's passions and hobbies, I think it provides a wider perspective on things, and then more material to in various corporate discussions. Because if you're just a technologist and that's it, so I think it gives you a very narrow look. So just if you had to describe your passions, these or others, Just however you can react, I would love to learn about them from your side.
Yeah. I guess all of them are scratching a particular itch that, for example, from time to time you get, and then you you kind of you start getting into the activities that are just interesting because of the one or another reason. And of course, cars and so motorcycles. I maybe you saw some pictures, but I have a couple
Probably.
of I have a couple of friends who are
Okay.
racing motorcycles, and then I from time to time I go to watch them, and then
Okay.
these are like a different breed of people because motorcycles, they are quite dangerous, quite risky, but also quite fun, right? So people are kind of I guess quite a bit of even maybe psychological papers could be written, like how people are evaluating the risks versus the rewards, because in motorcycles it's definitely the risk always outweighs the rewards, but people still do it. So it's really crazy. But when it comes to cars, so I actually for the longest time I didn't have a car because I was fortunate enough to be able to get around without it, and
Yeah,
of course,
same situation with me right
yeah,
now.
exactly. And I think being in Vilnius, it helps us quite a bit because we got car sharing companies quite some time back, and it was always possible to just get a car on the spot in a minute from your phone, and then you don't really need to get your own one. But then I kind of one time I stumbled into this Simulator Academy company in Vilnius, where they are kind of building these rigs for racing in virtual world. So you put on virtual reality goggles, you sit in a cockpit that is connected to a computer, and then you race. You race cars inside this virtual reality. So if I would have tried this maybe 10 years ago when we didn't have virtual reality, then maybe I wouldn't be that excited. But when you're put on these virtual reality goggles, you feel really like you're inside. I mean, if you, for example, go to a race and you are fighting between trying to get the first position and you're defending and everything, you're trying to overtake someone or you're trying to defend so you not get overtaken. I mean, I finished that race just like sweaty, and my heartbeat is through the roof. It makes you really feel like you're doing the real thing. And I realized that, I mean, it's probably not that realistic that I will get to race real cars, or at least I would get to race real cars like whenever I want and whatever cars I want. So this is how I got into sim racing, because like this is the
So you
experience.
don't race in real life, only in those simulators.
So I started last year racing in real cars, but it's not
Here we go.
it's mostly time trials, so you're not kind
Speaking
of
of risks,
yeah, exactly. The hunger grows with appetite, right? But it's just that I think it's mostly about the costs, right? So motorsport is extremely expensive, so that's why simulator is always going to be my bigger passion, because there you can try many different things. You can, for example, try to learn some racecraft as well. So racing is not just going fast. Going fast is easy. You just go to the highway and you can go fast if you're in Germany. But racing is also about psychology. So you try to get into other person's head and you try to make the other person make a mistake, because usually it's not that you're just faster than anyone else. It's usually you're just a bit more smart, and you're more collected and things like that. So from that point of view, it's a really interesting hobby. And
how
yeah.
racing either in simulators or in real life helps you to be a better software engineer? What do you think?
So there are some small and really easy, simple ways, because for example, when you start racing, you start getting into leagues, then you start getting this information about how you perform, and you want to analyze it and make it better. But then you notice that there are no tools to help you with that. So you start creating tools for that, and then you maybe share it with community. So that's one really small, practical way of making it better, because it gives you another itch to apply your skills, and then you talk with more people. But I guess that was not the answer you were
Yeah, I
hoping.
guess that's an interesting answer, and actually that those do passions feed each other in a way. But from a psychological perspective, I noticed that one of your Facebook covers included like 4 words: excitement, speed, focus, and control. And then when I think about it, yeah, software engineering, can it be exciting? Sure thing, if you're in the flow. Does it require speed? According to certain crazy managers, you have to be fast to be acknowledged that you are a good developer. So that's another thing. Focus. So we talked about focus, about flow, and then control. So you have to control a lot of information flow. So I see some parallels, but maybe I'm just reading into it. What do you think?
No, definitely that makes sense. But it's so funny because that cover picture was supposed to be a joke, but I made it maybe a bit too serious because one of my friends took this picture and it was out of focus. So then I kind of tried to do some tag names on it, and focus was supposed to be and kind of a joke that the picture is not in focus. How we can talk about focus when you're driving cars? But yeah, definitely. These things, of course, they maybe even one other thing is that like perseverance or persistence would also be the thing, because in programming you are kind of bashing your head against the wall quite often, but usually it's easier because then you're bashing your head, but then you talk with colleagues, you Stack Overflow it, and of course you don't have time to bash your head too much, and then you just come up with a solution. Maybe it's a good one, maybe it's a great one, but you come up with something. With the racing, like you can quickly hit your limits and you don't know how to go faster, but you see that other people are doing it, and then it's hard. Then you really need to you mentioned this thing before today, you need to go to first principles and you need to learn what makes the car go fast, like what are the physics of driving cars, and that also
Yeah, it
invites me
requires
quite a
you
bit.
to think. And I also think that despite that it requires you to think, it is a different thinking process. And I always say to my clients that if you want to get a proper rest, find an activity that is as much different from what you're doing daily as possible. And maybe in a simulator, it can sound like a computer game, but even that, it puts you into different mode, in different environment. And I think it's a space where sometimes problems can be solved unconsciously. And let's say if you take a ride for an hour or two and you get back and you see that why that code is being written easier now, what's going on, but that's the case. You get that rest. There are less blockers then. So I'm not sure, but maybe it's just my opinion. What do
No,
you think?
definitely, and I think that ties into this other activity that I do is traveling. That really is. I really follow the sentence that you just mentioned. Like, try to get into as much different place as possible, and traveling is that. But I've noticed that it doesn't really work good if I travel for a week or two, because then you really don't switch modes, and that's why I go into these vacations where, because I can't take a vacation for 6 weeks.
Yeah.
That's unfortunately impossible for most of us. But if you go to different place, and I think the sweet spot is like it starts to happen, you start to feel different after 4 weeks and more. You just kind of course, there are good things in schedule, there are good things in habits, but I like to break them completely, like once every year, and then rethink, because then it shines with a different light. You think again about the decisions you made earlier, and lots of things you don't even kind of start doing again. You just forget about them, and then you realize that, okay, it wasn't important because I
So
didn't
it's
start
like
doing it again.
rebooting your system in a way
Yeah.
by changing the environment. But still, I guess if you're working remotely, you don't have your precious setup, your all equipment. So you have to be very adaptive. So how does it influence your productivity?
Yeah, it shows me that I am as little productive with setup or without setup. It's the same. I mean, so there are of course these situations where big monitor would be better, but I mean, it's not about, and of course like the keyboards, okay, with one keyboard you're faster, but it's not the amount of keystrokes that you type which is the limiting factor. It's what's happening in your head, right?
Exactly.
And it's not use if, for example, you type a lot but then you need to fix lots of bugs. It's better to think about the thing deeply, think about the consequences of the choices that you're going to make, and then yeah, and try to nail it from the first time, because that's going to be the most efficient.
Got it. Got it. And finally, what about that youth awareness thing? What was that? It seemed like a surprise.
So I was invited by a classmate of mine to join this conference and do a bit of help related to the IT things. So I
Okay.
was their kind of IT support person during that during that meeting. But yeah, I was quite glad that I got the invitation and I met really quite a bit of interesting people. And of course, like there are so many of these different, I guess different stories of people, and it's always it's always interesting and maybe even inspiring to see that other people, they are pushing towards really different causes than
Yeah.
you think, then you get kind of then you see each day. So that was kind of I was glad that I was invited into that meeting.
And just curious, are you somehow personally related to this topic?
Yeah. So in the family, there was a person close to me that got cancer,
Uh,
but she
Sorry to hear that.
she survived it, so it's fine. But yeah, so I got invited by a friend who also survived
Yeah.
cancer. It's just something that is around us. So I mean, sooner or later, it seems that everyone is being touched by
Mm.
this disease.
Yeah,
Yeah.
my mother is also in remission right now, so I'm happy about that. So, and that this is, I guess, the thing that when I think about those good software. So to me, good software is that solves the actual real problem that we face. And I think mortality, especially when it's early and the person in a way doesn't deserve it. So it is a problem. And I think that there is smart people working on that topic and trying maybe from a biological perspective to look for different mechanisms in our genome that influence that. So I think that bioprogramming, bioengineering is also a very interesting field that more people might put their brains into, I guess.
Oh, yeah. The moment we can move our consciousness to a data center somewhere, it's going to be great. It's going to be great.
Okay. Okay, Martina. So I see that our time is running out. So I'd like, I guess, to provide this opportunity maybe to reflect. You mentioned that you would like to add more reflection in your life. So what are you taking from this conversation? What was like the key thing or key things? What do you think?
Ooh, yeah.
Just
Um, uh,
briefly, what comes to your mind? Don't feel under a spotlight.
yeah. Maybe kind of we talked about so many different things, and we
Yeah.
talked about programming not that much. So yeah. So and then you had this question of like what activities makes people
Mm.
better programmers. So I guess most of the time it's not programming that makes you better programming, right?
Mm.
Of course, in some cases you need that to get into some lower
Yeah.
level details, but not that many people are going that way, where you're trying to become a professional of a really small thing. That is, of course, also useful, but for that you need to dig into the technology quite a bit. Most of the time we are just kind of trying to solve different problems, and then yeah, the more activities you do, the more different people you talk to about these problems,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, the better solutions you're gonna get.
So what would be like your, let's say, not advice, I'm not sure, maybe recommendation for the coming year. So let's say people are listening now, they managed to reach this part of the conversation, and now there's an opportunity maybe to say something to these people. So now it's January when they are listening to this. So new year is coming. So still war is happening in Ukraine, unfortunately. So what would be your wishes for the technology community for the coming years? What would you like to wish?
Um, yeah, I don't know. It's all gonna be good. I think we will get through this one way or another, and yeah, let's enjoy it while it lasts, I guess.
Okay. Okay, Martinos. I think that enjoyment could be a topic for our conversation and
All
different
right.
ways how can we enjoy our work and our life in a way.
Yeah,
Okay,
sounds
so
good.
thank you, Martinos, for being here. It was a
Yeah,
pleasure.
it was fun. It's my first podcast, so I'm really glad. Thank you for the invitation. It was
Amazing.
great. Yeah.
Amazing. Thank you, Martinos.
Cheers.
See you
Yeah.
next time.